Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's second episode of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. We're hearing the word unprecedented quite a lot during these times of uncertainty, and to be frank, I wanted to jump on the bandwagon with an unprecedented second podcast in one day. Earlier today, we released our podcast with the delightful Elizabeth Jordan of the Antigua National Sailing Academy, and if you haven't heard it, it's well worth a listen to hear all about the incredible work they do for disadvantaged school kids in Antigua. However, I wanted to record a podcast to help our listeners to understand exactly what's happening in the travel industry just now, and to understand how different the future of travel for all of us may well be in the future. So this morning I caught up with Chris Flynn, who's been in a number of very senior positions in the industry for many years and is currently the President and CEO of the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage. I wanted to ask Chris whether travel as we know it will ever return to normal levels, and by this I mean pre-January 2020, and what he thinks the new normal will look like. This is how we got on. So, very good morning, Chris. Good to have you on the show again for the second time. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. And how's is the sun cracking the pavements in Manchester there, Jed?
Absolutely. It's about 12 degrees at the moment. So it's, yeah.
Fantastic.
It's as good as it's going to get, Chris. It's as good as it's going to get. How's it this evening in Sydney?
It's not too bad. It's not too bad. We had a lovely day today, or a lovely morning. It was beautiful blue skies when I woke and went out for a bit of a run. We can still do that here. I don't know whether you can do that there. And then I came back and it kind of dulled down in the afternoon. We had a big storm about 3:30 and they've predicted thunderstorms tonight. But the temperature's really dropping down now. It's probably only about 26. So I know that's British summertime or British temperatures, in summer for you.
But, it sounds like a nightmare, Chris. Yeah,
it's cool. It's cooling down here a little bit, which is quite nice. And the fact that we've got so much rain happening at the minute is great because we've been in drought for so long. It's actually wonderful to see it. So we celebrate it when it rains here.
Absolutely. Well, of course, we've all been following it on the news. Obviously, you had all of the bushfires over there earlier on this year, and now like the rest of us, you're in lockdown. So just talk us through. I mean, again, most of the listeners here are in the US and the UK. What's the lockdown involve for you guys in Australia?
I would imagine it would be pretty similar to you guys. So we have to, stay at home. We're only permitted to go out to do things like exercise or shopping. If you work in what's an essential kind of industry, of course you can go to work, but everybody else is housebound. We have social distancing, of course. You can't gather in. In fact, they've made it 2 now. So if you want to have a big party, there's just got to be 2 of you. And it's I'll be honest with you, I've had some good parties on my own in the past. But especially when you're traveling. Yeah. So that's basically how it is here. What's I think is getting people here is the fact that we don't know how long this is going to last. And we've had 6 months, we've had 3 months. We really don't know. But my own gut feeling for this is it's probably going to be closer towards 6 months. And, we're just going to have to get on with it, really, just like everybody else. The curve appears to be flattening already here, certainly in New South Wales, with the amount of cases that we've got, and thankfully, the amount of deaths that we've had has been relatively small so far, please God. So all up, it looks relatively positive here, but the fact is, you can get hit for a second or third time, and we've just got to be cautious. This is the new normal as a phrase has been used and thrown about quite a lot over the years, but this is, I suppose, kind of a new norm, but at the moment we don't know what the normal is. We have no idea what that normal is going to be. I actually put it down to, when I look at my parents coming out of the Second World War and how they had to adjust their behavior, with rationing and what have you, those kind of habits that they that they sort of like grew, if you will, during those periods where everybody had to do the same thing, follow the same patterns, ended up staying with them for the rest of their lives. So, you know, they never threw anything out, which used to drive me nuts, you know, and it's, and maybe we will become that next sort of generation that never throws anything out. Who knows?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is our behavior will change. Our habits will change, need to change. It'll be interesting to see how long they stick around. I think what will happen, and I think this has to be a good thing, is I think there'll be far greater social connectivity. I think there'll be a far greater appreciation of we as people. That distancing between, you know, not being able to engage, not being able to give people a hug, not being able just to shake somebody's hand or buy somebody a beer or a cup of coffee. I think that the appreciation of that when we get back to that stage will become very apparent. And I hope that we do get a better appreciation of both people, social, and maybe the planet itself.
Do you think that we will get back to that stage? Because it's interesting. I was speaking to somebody there recently. So myself and my family, for a couple of reasons, we've been in self-isolation now for 3 weeks, just over 3 weeks. So we've been doing it for quite a while, and already, you know, in the UK, the general guidelines are if you're walking down the street, you cross over the street away from somebody. And what I find interesting is when I'm looking at, you know, any of the soaps or whatever on TV, and you see people embracing and getting close, you almost kind of wince. You almost think this is looking a bit odd. And what I kind of find very intriguing is it's incredibly interesting how quickly we adapt to this, and therefore what I'm wondering is, if we were to be doing this around the world for 6 months, is there a fear that might leave a lasting effect on us for just being a little bit sort of separate from other people in a physical sense?
I think it's a process. And there were certain things that happened, you know, after SARS, and SARS, of course, only lasted for 3 months, not even that. People were still, once SARS actually finished, people were still fearful and were still skeptical. So from an industry perspective, from a tourism perspective, you know, SARS was declared, you know, over. I think it was late April or maybe mid-May of 2003. I'd need to check my dates. Mm. But travel still continued to decline for another month at least. And there were still some destinations that were running at like minus 40%, 50%, even 2 or 3 months after that. And it's because there's a fear, there's an uncertainty, there's a lack of confidence, if you will, in terms of how we look at this. So whether it's giving somebody a hug, and again, let's look back at the Second World War. It was a little bit like that afterwards. You know, people were uncertain as to whether it was actually over. Has it really finished? Interestingly, after SARS, when destinations like Canada and Taiwan and what have you began to go out with their messaging saying it's over, it's finished, people didn't believe them. The destinations continued to struggle. There was still a decline in visitation, and that's because there's a degree of self-interest in that. You want them to come back. You want them to come back to your destination, but are you really safe? Is it true what you're saying? So what we actually found when we were doing the study and the research after SARS was when you're exiting or transitioning from a crisis period like that, the way you communicate has to be very carefully thought out. And if you communicate via a credible third party, someone who actually communicates on your behalf. So it could be the World Health Organization or the UNWTO or whatever. They come out and say, nope, you know, Canada's fine, India's great, North America's terrific, Australia's fantastic. They actually make the announcement, not the destination. That basically it underlines the fact that it's safe. It comes from a credible source. So how you communicate this and how we get back to that new normal is all part of what we're talking about. That confidence building, that removing that fear, that you know, getting rid of that uncertainty is a very big part of how we communicate this.
Do you think that the travel industry, and I suppose globally, our travel habits, etc., do you think they'll ever return to normal? And by normal, I mean, pre-December last year.
Well, to some degree, well, the simple answer is no, in my opinion. There will be change. Again, the cruise industry is going to be hit very hard. The imagery that we've seen, we've got something like 10 or 12 cruise ships parked off different coastlines here in Australia. They're not being allowed to berth. So, and this is causing an awful lot of angst, both for the passengers, the cruise companies, and what have you. So the perception of travel and how we do it, I think, will change in consumers' minds. I think this gives us an opportunity, however, to reassess how we were doing business. Our industry has been on an upward curve for years. It's all been about, profit and growth and, how much more can we take? It's not been about quality. It's not been about the destination or the protection of the destination first, or the protection of our cultural heritage assets or anything like that. It's all been about how many people can we get through the turnstiles. I think the industry needs to assess or reassess itself now. It's got a great opportunity to do that. There will be some who want to get back on the horse and just want to go for growth and profit. And of course, you've got to make money. If you don't make profit, you don't exist. Mm-hmm. So a sustainable part of the industry. But it needs to be done better. And, down here, it's a little bit different. We're on a big continent with only a few people, only 24 million people, a couple of airlines. It's different. It's not like Europe with a million LCCs and airfares for $10 or whatever it is. We don't have that.
I don't think we. I don't think we will.
No, I don't.
In the not too distant future, I think
it's
that's one of the byproducts.
It's quite interesting. I think it was Bill Gates who probably 12, 15 years ago made the comment that the way he looked at the future of the aviation industry, he said, and again, I'm just sort of like paraphrasing here. I've probably got my things completely wrong, but he said something along the lines of, in about the next 20, 25 years, the world or the aviation industry will be managed by about 12 different airlines, and that's it. And when you look at what's going on right now, the industry itself has had to consolidate massively. Jobs have been shed. People will ration in terms of how they operate, what kind of revenues they can generate, if any, how they can make money, how they can do their analysis, all these different kinds of things. When we start to return to what will be that normal period, then it will be a completely different industry. There may need, if governments can't afford to bail out or nationalize airlines, so if they're going to be privately owned, then who are going to be the stakeholders? Who are going to be the shareholders? Are they going to consolidate? Are we going to start to see the mergers of some seriously major airlines? Now, it's happened in Europe before, of course, with KLM and what have you. Is this going to be something that we see happening on a greater scale? I don't know, because the other thing about it is this thing here, after SARS, there was like an immediate fall off. So we had some, from a consumer perspective, there was anxiety at the start of 2003. And that was because the US had been touting that they were going to go into Iraq, as a war. Mm-hmm. They were going to attack Iraq. So the curve had already started to decline at the start of 2003. And of course, as soon as the Iraq war happened, people in North America and different parts of the world started to stop traveling. 2 weeks later, after SARS, it fell off a cliff. Now, coming towards June, July of that year, the curve started to, quite a significant upward curve. But coming back to that fear and that confidence, that curve sort of leveled off, and we didn't reach the same amount of visits, shall we say, or tourism visitation globally for at least a year afterwards. So, when we look at the aviation industry now and what's happening now, there's a key difference here. If a virus crisis like SARS lasts for 3 months in reality, takes a year to recover, and we have COVID-19 now, where 70 or 80%, maybe more of the industry have lost their jobs and have no income. There was a difference with SARS. There was pent-up demand. Definitely, people wanted to travel. Here, there would be pent-up desire, not demand, because no one's going to have any money. So how are the airlines going to start to make profit when people can't put their hand in the pocket and pay for an airfare or a hotel or a tour? So you will start to see things transition in certain ways. You will start to see domestic travel increase. People will stay close to home. And again, it's that uncertainty. There'll be the next step where people will start to travel regionally. So in Europe, people might start to drive across borders from, Italy to Switzerland or whatever, or you might get a ticket to France from the UK or whatever. But it'll take significant amount of time for people to build the confidence to jump on a plane and travel 24 hours because you're away from your home base. And this is, yes.
Well, if I was just gonna say, if the assuming that the borders reopen, then we have to presume that in order for that to happen, for flights to go from one destination to another, carrying passengers, you have to have certainty that there is no COVID-19 on either end of that route. Therefore, for international travel to return to even have the ability to be able to return to air service, etc., to normal, you have to absolutely eliminate the chance of COVID-19. Is that going to happen in the next 5 or 6 months? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's again after 9/11, when you look at the change in security at airports and how we've gotten used to frustratingly taking our laptops out of our bags and having our little bag of toiletries and all that kind of thing. All of that was a direct result of terrorism, something that was, again, it was kind of an unknown, but it's something that we had to protect people and still have to protect people against. So will screening for viruses and temperatures, these special cameras that they use that can detect this, will that become part of an everyday scene or scenario at an airport? I reckon it probably will. But again, coming back to what you were saying in terms of getting on a plane and flying from here A to B, wherever A to B is, we still don't know who's going to be around. Right now, we've already lost one airline here, Tiger. That's gone. You're not going to see another Tiger Airlines fly here, that's for sure. It may be speculated in the press that it will happen, but it won't. And Virgin are looking for a bailout because, of course, they can't operate. So, we need two airlines here for competition. So how does the government manage that? Does it bail out Virgin but leave Qantas? Most of Qantas' aircraft now are parked outside in Alice Springs in the desert. So who's going to be around? We honestly don't know. These are the questions that doesn't matter how long you've been in this industry, you just can't answer. Because it's just such an unknown, because this is, as I say, from an aviation perspective, it took a year for people to recover after SARS. I have no idea how long this is going to take.
It was interesting, actually. I was watching a webinar yesterday by Travel Massive. Shout out to those guys. And they had as a guest on Timothy O'Neill Dunn, who, I don't know if you know Timothy, but he's been in the aviation industry and the travel industry for quite some time and operates now as a consultant. And And he was saying that apparently all of the money which the airlines currently have, so that which they're holding for future bookings. So you'll have noticed you were supposed to be traveling to the UK recently, and you were with Qatar, was it? You haven't.
Yeah.
I'm presuming you haven't got a cash refund yet, right?
No.
Yeah, and apparently there are millions literally around the world that also haven't got the cash refund. So what Timothy was saying in yesterday's webinar is that if all of the world's airlines had to pay out that money, which by rights they should, as a refund to everybody, pretty much every airline in the world would go bust, bankrupt immediately. So that kind of made me think, okay, that means that everybody that has forward booked is effectively taking a hit. Effectively, we're bailing the airlines out right now, pretty much. But what he was painting, the picture he was painting, is one where, like you were saying before, really, the airline landscape is going to be massively changed, and there's going to be consolidation, the likes of which we've never seen before. And if that's the case, that means there's going to be less seats traveling around the world. And I think, for a lot of our listeners, what we're all wanting to know is, we're on lockdown, are we going to be able to travel again soon? We want to, there's destinations that we dream of going to. I'm absolutely on a mission. I want to see Mexico. And part of me now is wondering, have I missed that opportunity? Will I get that opportunity again, or without being a millionaire?
Well, again, just to answer that question, I mean, well, not to answer it, but just to add to it. Qatar has said to me, we'll give you a voucher and it's valid for a year. But a lot, wow. Will I be able to afford to go in a year? Will any of us be able to afford to go in a year? So the voucher is worthless.
Yeah.
So are you going to claim it from your insurance company? So if you claim it through your insurance company, what's going to happen to your insurance policies for the future? How's that going to escalate? Coming back to the losses of aviation, again, looking at SARS, in 2003, IATA predicted that the airline industry would lose $10 billion in 2003, right? That's what they said they would lose. By the end of SARS, US carriers alone had lost more than that.
Wow.
And that only lasted for 3 months. So think about that.
Yeah.
So what is going to be the picture? We don't really know. And it's not only airlines. What about the aircraft manufacturers?
Mm-hmm.
Boeing, Airbus are already in trouble with the A380. That's gone. It's a freighter. It's going to be a freighter for the future. Obviously, it's a beautiful airplane. Don't get me wrong. Just wrong for the time. But how are our travel patterns going to change? Will we start to see, new LCCs or hybrids or whatever? Who's going to be out? Who's going to be willing to take a risk? There's so many questions that we don't know the answer to, and I think there's going to have to be an awful lot of crossover in terms of industry dynamics in terms of aviation, tourism, and external industries. Our industry gets pushed by innovations that tend to come from other areas. Airbnb is a classic example. These guys weren't in tourism. It was a new sort of innovation on the sharing economy, and that whole sharing economy thing completely changed the way our industry operates to some degree, or considers things to some degree. So what's going to happen now? What are going to be the external influences that are actually going to change our industry? What's going to move us forward? Because it's going to have to be a mix of both. It's going to have to be a mix of expertise within the industry, people with experience that maybe have been through this kind of stuff before, or similar, or crisis, or, have certain types of skill sets. But I think that there's going to be a need for an awful lot of external influence here to actually get us to where we need to be, not just in tourism, but in other industries as well. So it's a real tricky sort of plethora of unknowns here. We don't really know where we're going. We can only tread carefully day by day and sort of analyze it accordingly. But if we get enough smart minds doing the right thing and starting to prepare for this, we should be preparing for recovery right now as an industry, even though we're in lockdown. So manage the crisis, consolidate, tighten your belt, do all those kind of things that we're seeing now. But in companies within the industry itself, we should be preparing for the recovery. We should be looking at all sorts of stuff, human resource, you know, how are we going to upskill? Who are the people we're going to need to bring in to actually manage the process of all of that kind of thing? These are the considerations that we should be doing now, and boards should be making plans. They should have plans or be putting plans in place to allow us to sort of re-engage, if you will, in a staged process, that so we're not floundering all over the place as an industry.
Do you think that, I mean, is a lot of the tourism destinations, the tourism authorities, I should say, around the world, I mean, I guess right now they must be really challenging their own plans. So, you know, if you're Tourism Australia, for example, the European market might make up, I don't know, 20-30% of the overall tourism offering. You know, are they going to be reevaluating their strategy now, figuring, you know what, any money that we were going to be spending on trying to get those, really, we need to funnel that more into Asia, because we've got a greater chance of getting that from Asia and getting more Asians rather than we have of getting Europeans?
Well, again, from experience, and I mentioned it earlier, there'll be a 3-step process. When people start to travel, they'll start to travel close to home.
Yeah.
So you focus on your domestic market.
Right.
Or, you know, down here, you know, we don't necessarily have massive markets, so there'll be a lot of activity in New Zealand trying to bring the New Zealand market back to Australia and vice versa. Then, of course, we'll step out into Southeast Asia. China, of course, will also be a potential market, but it will be this whole thing of a staged approach. People are not going to jump on a 24-hour flight, you know, 5 minutes after, you know, coronavirus is over. It's just not going to happen, because that fear, that uncertainty is probably a better word, is going to impact so many different people. You know, would you really want to, unless you had to, would you really want to leave your family behind and risk going over there if all of a sudden there was another outbreak? We didn't see it coming. It was from a country that wasn't necessarily, doesn't have the skill sets and the technologies that we have, and it could re-emerge, and you could find yourself stuck again. You know, all these kind of considerations. This is why it takes time to process all of that. You know, and I've got to say, shout out to Tourism Australia. You know, we've got a new CEO here, just taken over the job. Gets hit with the worst bushfires we've ever had in the history of Australia, and 5 minutes later you get hit with this. You know, what do you do? But that's it. That's the thing. The strategy has to be a staged process. Destinations, if they think they can go out and just market the same way, ain't going to happen. They need to consider different ways of marketing as well that's going to allow them to do that. I mean, you still need to have a message in these areas, but you would look at more cost-effective ways that could give you a better ROI on what that marketing or that budget would be used for.
It kind of links me on to one of the last points, really, which is, look, you know, we know from history, usually looking back retrospectively, that every crisis that the industry has faced, it does bring about, there are opportunities that come out as a result. You know, I always think, you know, yes, worldwide, this current, this current disaster of epic proportions, yeah, there are some who will benefit from this. And what I wonder is, in the travel industry, are there any, as far as you can see, are there any beneficiaries, or is there any way in which any organizations or startups can, in some way, shape or form, capitalize on this? Or capitalize it on it in the future? Where are the opportunities here?
That's kind of a tough question. I think, for me, I think destinations and products, whether it be a tour operator or whatever, and it comes back to the point I made a little bit earlier. I think the opportunity exists here for our industry to take a deep, hard look at itself. And you will have seen, I'm sure, in the press and online, you know, these different things about, you know, the canals of Venice are clean, the smog in Delhi is gone. That's what people want. So I think, as an industry and as destinations, if we can embrace environment, if we can embrace the stuff that is most important to a destination, and I know I represent culture and heritage, but that is incredibly important. So we need to have these protections in place and make sure that we don't fall into the same traps that we did before. So the opportunity, the way I look at it, is that people will want to visit places, they will want to experience, different tours and different environments that are demonstrating that they have this at their heart, that they have sustainability, the environment, culture, heritage, all the things that we originally started traveling for. They have them front and center as being the crux of why, this destination is doing what it's doing, and people will follow that. The mass tourism that we've seen may come back, but it's going to be a while, but even the resorts, even the Mediterranean resorts they'll need to reskin and rethink the way that they've done business in the past. But this whole idea of doing it right, of getting it right, and making sure that the visitor is front and center and matches perfectly with the destination's offering, etc. I think that's going to be incredibly important in the future. That's the opportunity for me.
So that's the really big opportunity. Is we've got we've got this hopefully once in a lifetime opportunity to have the rebirth of the travel industry, and this time we can do it right in a responsible way.
Absolutely. We're an industry that's been allowed to grow, in our own way. Of course, there's policy here and there's restrictions there and all that kind of stuff. But we've just grown, and it's all been about numbers, and it's all been about profit. And no minister wants to have we all say as an industry, it's about the quality of the tourist. It's about the yield. It's about how much they spend as opposed to the visitor, right? Mm. But you tell me a minister around the world, there's probably very few that want to say, oh, I've got a decline of 15% in visitation. I might have increased 25% on the revenue, but nobody wants to have that negative. That's got to change. Mm. We have to restrict the amount of people that we bring into our destinations for the right reasons. Because by doing that, by knowing how much you can take before you break, by doing an exercise, a carrying capacity, this is the time you should be doing a carrying capacity study to understand what your destination can take. If we know that, then we can build the infrastructure, we can build the product, we can build the experience right for the consumer, right for the traveler, right for the industry, and most importantly, right for the local people who call these places home. Because as we have grown, local residents have always been the one that have suffered when it comes to over-tourism, when it comes to, again, look at Venice. There's only 50,000 people living in Venice now, and you can't buy an apartment there for less than $1 million or whatever it is. So, we've got to change the way we do this. And I think if we do, and we start to build it accordingly, and we don't run at it, because we're not going to be able to run at it, because this is going to take a while to fix, then I think from a consumer perspective, a traveler perspective, destinations who do that, who show that kind of responsibility, will be the successes of the future. And that will be a very interesting dynamic to watch.
Fair play. I think that's about all we've got time for, Chris. Thanks a million, as always, for your time and your insights. I suppose the very, very final point: are you optimistic generally, Chris, as you sit there isolating without Wi-Fi? I should let all of our listeners know. Chris was telling me that he's not got Wi-Fi at the moment, which is, I think, for all of us, our biggest nightmare, being a lockdown without Wi-Fi. Are you optimistic generally?
All right. Well, I've had no Wi-Fi for 2 weeks, and I have an 18-year-old daughter. Just think of that. Just think of that equation.
Doesn't bear
never
thinking
known
about.
A world without. No, I know. Oh my God. Of course, I'm optimistic, but I'm optimistic that we're going to get it right, and I'm not romantic about that. I think that there's a lot of smart people out there, and we should be destinations and products and what have you should be tapping them on the shoulder, saying, okay, how are we going to get out of this? What is the strategy? We're going to emerge out of this. It'll be different. Absolutely, it'll be different. But it's having the checks and balances and the right people in place to allow us to move steadily. As I say, it's not going to be a torrent. It's going to be baby steps when we start to emerge. So as we start to emerge like that, yeah, we can start to put the right checks and balances in place that's going to allow my destination or your destination to do things better and to do things right. So yeah, I'm absolutely optimistic. I think this could be fantastic for our industry, most importantly, fantastic for the planet. And we might have some more common sense, if you will, in the way we actually do business in the future.
Here's hoping. Chris, thanks a million as always, and looking forward to hearing from you again at a future podcast. Always a pleasure, Chris.
Likewise, Jim. Take it easy, mate.
So there you have it. Huge thanks to Chris for taking the time out to speak with us this week, and I'll be updating you all with more special podcast interviews with tourism and travel industry insiders on the effects of the pandemic on our travel dreams over the coming weeks. Thanks a million for joining us again this week, and if you do have any burning questions or recommendations for future interviews, then you can contact me directly at jed@lowseasontraveller.com. Have a great weekend, take good care, and keep your travel dreams alive.